Greetings, everyone, and welcome to An Imperfect Union. This is our second broadcast of the year, and as promised, we're going to get a little bit more into religion and its effect not only on our neighborhood, but upon our culture, our politics, uh, and our history, to be very frank. So let's get to some of our guests today. Miss Sims is in. Well, good evening, Sims. How are
Greetings, Mr. King. Greetings. Greetings.
you? And I see Mr. Scott is here. Hello, Mr. Scott. How are you doing?
Greetings. Greetings. I had to come on a different computer because I went up to the one I wanted to use. I got to know passwords and all this sort of kind of stuff. So I just went on and got on this one. This one let me right in. So I don't know the quality of this one, but I'm here.
Well, is it a Kirk Cousins? Is it a Kirk
Who?
Cousins fan or what?
Who? You
Kirk
mean
Cousins.
you mean dimmer? You mean the dimmer? You know, dimmer switch has been turned off.
uh,
And,
oh
and,
man.
and your man, I'm telling you, your man. Boy, he just figures it out. I just can't. I thought for sure they were done. I mean, they're just like you got to cut their head off. They're like a snake. They just can't. They're not going nowhere.
I done stuck a fork in them all season, and yet still those are my boys. I got to ride with them. So, hey, we got a hard job, but things are looking up. But you know, I think it's kind of appropriate that we do start this conversation off with people of our age, our generation. Uh, Miss Sims and I get into this all the time about our kind of different conflict of opinion here. But today, I'm going to start out going back to my old roots. As a lot of I'm a PK. PK meaning preacher's kid. And I was the typical preacher's kid. I was the baddest in church. Yeah. So, and it kind of followed me up onto my real life due to some of the bad experiences I had. But I want to talk about the book of Genesis. And I marked off a couple. Well, let me read.
I got my Bible.
Well then, Miss
What
Sims,
what
since you have
version? What Miss Sims? What version do you have?
I have several, but I just picked up one that was handed. It says New Revised Standard Version.
okay, we're gonna go to
But this is
the chapter.
I'm following you. I'm following you, Mr. King. Go ahead. I'm ready.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna start out with in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form, with darkness over the abyss, and over. Let me see where I have a couple different versions I have stacked up here. Uh, Miss Sims, am I reading the same one that you are?
What verse are you on? Chapter and verse.
Uh, it's Genesis 1, and it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the earth and the deep. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness." Now, I'm going to stop right there. Now, a lot of white supremacist groups not only this not only means that he separated day from night, but when they say light from dark, they also tend to think that this, or they tend to use this as also the basis for a separation of
Mm,
races.
mm, mm,
Now, there's also another version of the Bible that says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God." Now, I use these two because both of these sentences to me have been used to enslave not only the bodies, but the minds of black people from even before slavery. But let's say, for the sake of this country, slavery, because a lot of the times the only book that was available for slaves, whether it was to be read to them or for them to sneak off into the cabin to read at night, was the Bible. Miss Sims,
Yes.
um, what do you think about the way that religion has been used throughout history in order to enslave not only minorities, but also the same race if you were not of the same religion? We can go back to the Crusades, we can go back to Exodus, where the Egyptians worship many gods and the Hebrews worship one God. What's your take on this, Miss Sim?
Well, the what you just read and explained where it was come from, I never heard an interpretation like that from the scriptures that you read. I always, I'm a bottom line person, and I always go back to um, when you talk about the Bible. Are you talking about there's a difference between religion and Christianity in regards to what you're talking of and who you're talking about. Now, bottom line for me, if you, no matter who you are, if you consider yourself a devout Christian and you follow the word and you believe the word, then there is no way that you can say that there's more than one race. Because everybody, if everybody started from Adam and Eve, everybody's DNA will get back to those two. So God's plan was God's plan is one way, man's plan is another. And how man has used God's plan, as you're speaking of, to separate us as a people and to oppress us as a people is of man's making, not God's. And so, but it was very interesting what you just read. I'm familiar with the scriptures, but I never heard it use that interpretation or knew that people use it in a way that you had described.
Well, I mean, this is, you can
I'm
go
not saying
on
it's
and
right or wrong.
no,
It's just
no,
I'm learning from you.
no,
Everybody,
no,
learns from each other.
yeah,
Yep.
no, but what I'm saying is that you can go on any white supremacist site
Hmm.
and find these same verses
I'm not
in
saying,
order.
and I've never done it, and I'm learning from you. I didn't realize that they went that deep. I mean, they went all the way back to the very the first word to try
Well,
to
what
explain
I'd
their
like to say,
behavior.
Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
yeah, what I'd like to say is, first of all, James, you being a preacher's kid, you should know that Wednesday is prayer meeting day. Okay, that's when you have prayer meeting on Wednesday. Okay,
James doesn't go. We gotta take him when he's there. When he's in that
I,
frame of mind, we gotta take him whenever that happens, Mr. Scott.
but
This is it.
but what you really hit on really
You're
on the
definitely right. You're definitely right, no, Mrs. Scott. You're definitely right about the Wednesday night. And I'm. Let's see. Usually it's at 7, I believe, instead of 6. But
but but
yeah,
see they did that. They did that because see you had to have. They kept reinforcing their faith. And see what you're talking about two different things when you talk about the Bible and the people in their faith to me because my grandmother, my mother who played the piano at the church, directed the choir, their faith is what really drove them. I mean, they followed the Bible, and my grandmother never had a chance to really go to school. They down in Talladega, Alabama, her school burned down. They never built another one, so her daddy said, "You just work." But she tried to read us the Bible. She would read us the Bible verses, and she would say words like "thee," and I said, "No, Grandma, it's the. It's supposed to be the." She said, "No, no, no, thee." And she read how she was taught, and she really, I mean, she was a faithful servant of that belief. But it's a funny thing. One thing about her and faith, she sang in the choir. She, after every church Sunday, we'd have dinner at her house. But I was in the car with my grandfather, who was a deacon at the church. He was he collected the money at the end, did all that.
Hmm.
But we were in the car one day, and he's trying to teach her how to drive. Okay, I never heard no cussing like that in my whole life. I had no idea my grandmother knew them words. And she couldn't get it, and he knew she couldn't get it, and they were back and forth. And so we get back to the house, and
now,
he said,
now,
"I'm
now,
going to bed." I
Mr.
said, "Okay."
Scott,
He said,
uh, uh,
and he
I
goes to
got,
bed down in the basement. That's where he goes
I
home. He
got
has to sleep in the basement. But I
I,
say all that to say there's a real
look,
component to that,
was it an
and the
automatic or
faith.
was it a stick shift? I
Doesn't
got,
matter. Sounds like it doesn't matter.
But that's a good question, James, because it was an automatic, but the car had a push button. It didn't
oh,
have the thing like this. It was an old Dodge that had the push
yeah.
button
I
thing.
had a Chrysler like that. Yeah, I remember. I remember those a little push button on the side. Yeah. Uh,
But
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 go
the
ahead, Mr.
faith,
Scott.
I mean, they were very devout in what they did, and they came from a time where they had nothing down south. I asked my grandfather, he had an old guitar. And I said, "Well, why did the people down south only play acoustic guitars? Why not?" He said, "We didn't have no electricity down there. We didn't have no running water. We had a well. We had to go out to the outhouse." And so it began to give me a real perspective of what they went through when they came up here and what I see now when people come up here. I just don't see that type of a mentality where people have a mission. See, they wouldn't let us with redlining, and I've done a lot of studies on this stuff. They wouldn't allow you to buy a house, and then when you could get a loan, you couldn't get one. You could only get a contract for deed with these people, and if you missed the payment, they could just put you out and put somebody else in. I mean, all
Hmm.
those things they had to go through. It's like
Yeah.
we're not building on that. See, they built on the power of that, and I just see that I still believe faith and the church has a place in our lives. But I think the reality is you don't live forever. These things, and in the course of our lifetimes, we have to for our kids, for our lives, and so many of our men go to prison before they can get an education. So many get caught up in things because of the neighborhood, because of things they're put into, as opposed to things that they really want to gravitate to. So I believe the word is good. I believe the Bible's right. I believe the word is good. but
Okay, then.
people don't listen to it that much anymore.
Okay, then let's go a step further. Do you believe in the vengeful God of the Old Testament, or do you believe in the benevolent God of the New Testament?
Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm gonna get after Miss Sims.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about two different people,
Well,
and
no, I'm talking about the difference between the New Testament and the Old Testament. If you read the
I
Old,
know that, but the way you
it's the
said it,
same.
how you
It's the
how you
same
say
book.
things,
It's,
that's what I'm thinking. Do you believe? I mean, the way you said it, it was like, well, you were talking about two different entities, two different people. Uh, but like again, if you believe the Bible and what it says,
the, the, the,
you
the,
believe both
the,
happen. Both happen. But the old and the new. You couldn't have the new without the old. That's like having a child without parents.
the difference is that basically, I mean, there are other differences, but basically, one is before the birth of Jesus and one is after the birth of Jesus.
Right.
And if you read the Old Testament, where you have the enslavement of the Jews, and you have the Old Testament is full of war. You have Lot. You have, I mean, you can go on and on with the stories of what happens to people that are not faithful to the God of the Old Testament. Whereas in the New Testament, until you get to the book of Revelations, of course, and you start talking about the seven horses of the apocalypse, but basically, most of the Old Testament, I mean, of the New Testament, is about forgiveness. Being, uh, if you recognize and uh, submit to the power of the Almighty, you will be saved, and there will be a place for you in heaven.
What do you think that is?
Well,
I
that's
think that is
good.
because they push us into thinking you get your reward after you die. See that when you're here
Ah,
on this earth, when you're here on this earth, the white man and they rule this and they can tell you what to do, and you'll get your reward when you die. You see, and so some of that is really a lot of manipulation to me. And when I look at and read the Bible, one of the great things that I get out of that, along with trying to read Quran and the other books, is that it's written by people that lived before us. They lived this life before we've lived it. They've gone through all the things that we see in this life now, and they're telling us how it affected them. It's just people are the same. All internet and all this stuff, telephone, and kids can't dial. I give them a telephone to dial a telephone. I don't know what it is. They pushing buttons, don't know how the thing works. Everything is the same except all the technology and your life. They tell you that there's the afterlife. They tell you that there's that you get yours then. And they use that to me to allow the redlining, to allow put you in this neighborhood, to, you're the most uneducated, we're the most uneducated, less opportunity. And I think they've used that and confused. When my folks come from Birmingham, Talladega, well, George Wallace, Orville Faubus. I mean, this man stood in front of the school and said, "These niggas ain't coming in here. They're not going
yeah,
there." And so, yeah,
yeah.
Well,
George Wallace was actually shot in Columbus, Ohio. Uh, we didn't when he come up there with that BS. It was even a white man shot him. But anyways, But go ahead,
you
Miss
with
Sims.
good
both of you,
reason.
yeah, both of you have my brain working because you're going presenting two different. It's all kind of like the before and after, and what Mr. Scott said it was kind of like the reality of nowadays. But going and and maybe he and I are hearing you in two different ways. But going back to James, what James says, and the bottom line, in the beginning, God's plan was for man not to allow evil to enter the world. If man had gone by God's plan, there probably would not have been a reason to need to have Jesus be born in the New Testament, because his plan was the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. Everything was in order and perfect. His plan was one way. Man comes in and screws things up kind of from the beginning, and and I always thought about, what and during that time when Adam and Eve allowed evil to enter into the earth, why didn't God just start over? Got rid of them and started over with a new, new people, etc., etc. He could have done it, and the only thing my brain would say, because he I don't know whether his powers wouldn't, wherever entities come from wouldn't allow that, but I get to
But
think,
wait a
well,
minute,
maybe,
Miss
well, wait,
Sims.
no, wait, no,
Uh,
let me finish my chain of
okay,
thought, because
okay.
he kept Adam and Eve and the evil, and allowed the evil in the world, but his here again, he had to go to Plan B, and Plan B was to get man back in back into sync with his plan. The way to do that was, his plan was in sin forehead was to have Jesus, was to have the birth of Christ later on down the line.
Miss Sims.
But I think his
uh,
plan,
well,
my
hold on,
estimation, just
hold
one
on, hold
statement.
on, hold
Okay.
on, Mr. Scott, because there's an incident that happened in between there that Miss Sims seems to have forgot. There was a guy named Noah in the Great Flood,
Yeah,
and
I
if
didn't forget.
well, now isn't that when God started over? He said, if what was it? If you couldn't find 7 men of faith, and Noah ended up taking his family and the animals into the ark. He didn't take any other people, so he did start over.
In a sense, but he didn't take away the evil. He
Ah,
he
but
he started over with a group or set of people, but evil
But
was
I
still in
still
the world.
say what God gave us was life. Okay. And what God wanted us to do is, you guys got to figure this out. You guys have to figure this out. I really believe giving you life is the best gift you can ever have. You can't get nothing better than that on this earth.
right,
I don't care about
right.
money. I
I
don't care about
agree.
any of that. I mean, I believe that you have to figure this out. When I first got married, see, my grandmother used to take care of us, and because my mom was the only child, and we spent so much time. And so I figured when I get married, I can just call my mother-in-law. I want to go play tennis. I want to go do this. I can just take the kids over there. And she's like, well, if you call me next week, the girls are playing cards today, and then I got to go to the church, and Wayne's going to the lodge. But so in other words, you got to figure this out. This is your family, and you have to make the thing. And I really believe that's what God really wanted. It's for us to do this, and we have failed miserably. We have failed miserably.
Any other thoughts on that, Miss Sims?
Well, I can't dispute what Mr. Scott has said, but if you follow biblically, and his plan, like I said, he didn't start over with Adam and Eve and do away with evil from that point. You mentioned Noah. Okay, he's because man's mind and the allowance of evil to enter into the world created a lot of the situations that caused him to destroy the earth with water and to save the people that he thought felt were righteous at that point and would carry on. But he didn't, as I remember, he started over in a sense with Noah and his family, but evil was still in the world, and so he still had his plan, and down through the ages, whatever. Still, we still had to go through that. He still wanted to redeem bring him back into in one accord with him, but that motion still continued and to allowed him to continue a way to bring us back and back into the world. And the way to do that was through his son Jesus Christ, because as I remember, uh, God doesn't live with evil. He doesn't uh, exist where evil exists. And that was one of the reasons why, in order to, and he, as Adam and Eve, when I'm simplifying it very much, as Adam and Eve went their way, God did not, God in a human form or present form, he did not remain on the earth because evil existed. And so still to, he still loved, God so loved us that he still, even though he went away, he had to do a plan B. The plan B was for someone to come into being that could live on the earth in evil, while at the same time redeem people, give people, teach people about the redemption that was there for them to get back into order with God's plan. And so one was the way he chose to do it was through his son Jesus Christ, who could live on the earth where evil still existed, while at the same time work out God's plan B.
Now, once again, it might not be Genesis, it might be Exodus. Something. No, I believe it is Genesis where we talk about the devil and how before being cast out of heaven, the devil was God's most favorite angel. We also talk about how he took his followers, meaning the devil, he took his followers with him, or at least God allowed him to take his followers with him. We are also introduced to the serpent in the Bible, which tempts Eve. So therefore, we know that God allows evil to coexist in the world. Just once again, using parable, the difference between the lightness and the darkness. Light being good, dark being evil.
I
Well,
agree
that's
they
one
Now,
thing.
coexisted. And
That's
they,
what we misinterpret.
hold on. Let's bring this to Exodus, and where the Jews are enslaved by the Egyptians. The darker skinned people, at least according to legend or according to the way that they show it on TV, of course, the Jews are white. The Egyptians are dark skinned people. They have enslaved the people of Israel. They have enslaved the chosen people of God. Once again, when you go back to your fundamentals of white supremacy, these are some of the same scriptures, because we all know the scriptures can be interpreted in much different ways. You can go to a Catholic church and you read the same scripture in a Baptist church and a Jehovah's Witness. They all mean something different. Same words, different interpretations. So, once again, I'm going to ask, have we been, in the words of Malcolm, hoodwinked into, believing, we are building our treasures up in the afterlife? And it is okay. Not only is it okay, but it contributes to a certain amount of sainthood if you do the suffering. So
Well, I'll
go
ask you,
ahead.
when you say hoodwink, do you mean were we hoodwinked by God or by man? Because you got to remember there's God's plan and there's man's plan. Like when you first go to
Who
church or
who
as you're growing
who
in church,
told you? Who told you about God's plan?
I read it. People down through the ages,
You
just
you
like
you
Mister. Wait a
you
minute. Wait,
read it.
just like Mister Scott's father or whatever made a history of what was going on during his time. Somebody somehow in vengeance or however you want to go in that depth, somehow it was recorded for us and put in a place for a place for access or and read about called the Bible. Somebody recorded all this. You got to remember, people really did live a long time ago, and if someone had not recorded
Go
the
ahead, Doctor
history,
Casey.
what was going on at that time, someone didn't record it at
Okay,
that
I'll send
time,
you a
we would
different
not
one.
be able to look back. Just like I'm anxious to order, and I keep putting it off. I want to order the Scott collection. I do already have the book that Mr. Scott wrote. I think I got that last year sometime. I got 4 copies of it. Uh, one for myself, the children, and then I work with uh, people that are homeless, etc., etc. One of the things that I keep hearing from the leadership that they didn't learn about their black history and things like that. And so when I heard about the time when Mr. Scott was talking about the book he had written, I wanted to them to know about the black leadership, their history that was going on right now in their time, and people are people that they lived with in their community. So here again, somebody has recorded something for us to refer to.
Yeah, and in the biblical sense and in the historical sense, there's nothing that says that black people are inferior to anybody. I
Right.
mean, there's no basis, there's no science, there's nothing that says that whatsoever. It was just an economic thing where, the way things were at these times that they could take hey, I love it. I love it. But have you been vaccinated? Have you been vaccinated? Have you been vaccinated?
I have not been vaccinated, and the way that people dying, dropping like flies, I don't want to be vaccinated.
I don't know. I
We
have
have to
not
get
heard. I have
vaccinated.
heard. Now I got to step in there because I haven't heard about any deaths here in California. I've heard about people catching, but as far as it being deadly, that's
You
not the
you
case here in
probably
California.
have to. You probably got to look it up because they ain't really broadcasting them numbers like that.
Hey, I trust me. There's nobody that looks up more stuff on the vaccine than yours truly. Okay,
Well,
uh, but
everybody,
but but but
I,
but we're talking about religion today. Okay,
I know.
and I got I and I know
She distracted me because I was gonna come down to Atlanta. I thought we could have a little dinner or something, but she's not vaccinated, so I can't do it. I can't
Well,
do it.
yeah,
And listen,
I
just as much as you
I
are
knew.
unsure of my unvaccination, I think that y'all that's vaccinated is pretty contagious too. So we feel the same way.
What
Well,
are you saying?
I knew that Dr. Casey has been chomping at the bit to get into this subject, and so has Mr. King. So I came prepared for her when in case she
You
got
think
off
you're
on me.
prepared.
Wait a minute, I got off. I kind of prepared for her when she wanted to shut me down or whatever. I was going to pull out this
Well, good,
to
good.
shut
Look,
her
look,
down,
look. I think that y'all
and
contagious.
change it, get her to
I'm
get off
asking
on
people if
another
they
subject.
vaccinated because I don't want to be around you if you're vaccinated. I
You,
might come
you,
around, but I'm gonna keep my distance a little bit because I
you
think that
all are
y'all
a
contagious.
mess.
I think that
You,
that
all are a
vaccination just
mess. I'm
is
telling you,
bad.
you are.
I
But
know
back to
my
what I was
immune
saying.
system will be I can donate blood to the Red Cross as an unvaccinated person, but y'all are not
Really?
able to do that.
I beg to differ because I just gave blood 3 weeks ago.
Not to somebody that got COVID and trying to get healed. You can't do
No, no, no. You said the Red Cross. Now, what the Red Cross did with it after they got it, that's their business.
it.
you know.
Yeah,
I can go to any blood bank and give blood. Now, like I say, what they do with it, that's up to
They
them.
can't use it
But
on people that got COVID.
well, no, I guess not. If they already got COVID, not only that, but well, anyway, we'll get it. But but
That COVID is a whole discussion.
yeah, yeah, because number one, if you got COVID and you decided not to get vaccinated, you sure your ass shouldn't be in the hospital. Keep living with it like you pray to
But
God,
the
pray to
person
God,
that gets
pray to
COVID
God, and
unvaccinated, the
let.
person that gets COVID that's unvaccinated, their immune systems and their antibodies in their body is stronger than what y'all get with the vaccination and the million boosters that y'all gonna need. You're gonna
Well,
get a
Based on
that
what
booster every
that
six
science?
months.
Based on
that
what
that that
science?
that that
Doctor, based on what
hold
science?
on,
What study?
hold on. Let's get back
bring
on
it back,
religion.
James. Bring it
Yeah,
back. Pull
let,
her
let,
in.
let,
Pull her
let, let,
in.
let, let, let's get back on religion because uh now whereas Mr. Scott might have a problem with your being vaccinated, I got a problem with you putting reverend in front of your name. Because I believe that anybody that puts reverend in front of their name or that espouses religion is a hindrance to us as a people.
Who use
So,
Reverend?
well, now, you said that you were an ordained minister.
That don't mean I use Reverend, and it doesn't mean that I am anything to do with religion.
Well,
That's an
but
assumption.
Yes, that's
well,
what I was waiting to hear her. I waiting to hear from her on that.
that is an assumption based on your title. Just like
No,
if
what title do you read on that screen?
uh, I read Dr. Casey on that screen,
Okay. What
but
title
part
did I tell
but
you?
part of your resume, and you mentioned
If
it on
you
this program, is
if you
that
look
you
here,
are an ordained minister.
I have been ordained by Universal Life Church. This is a non-denomination, non-religion organization that allows people to get ordained in order for the purposes of marriage. But when you become ordained, you have also the ability to do anything that any ordained minister does, because the ordination that happens in a church is not some certification or anything. You don't have to do anything but be appointed by somebody else that was appointed by somebody else that was appointed by somebody else to be an ordained minister. There is
But
nothing that you can do.
what's the difference between a minister and a reverend?
A
What's the
title, what
difference?
they choose to call, there is no difference. It is
That's what
there. You
James.
can get.
That's what
Let me
James
tell you
was
something.
saying. That's what he just
Hold
said.
on, hold on.
Well, to
No,
me,
y-
I
no,
only
you
heard
see,
her. I only heard
no,
her use the word minister, and
No,
to me, you can. I mean,
ministry is not
ministry. Yeah,
religious.
right, ministry.
Ministry
And
is
so
servanthood.
your ministry can be looking after the homeless. Your ministry can be going to the shelters. Your ministry can be looking out
Ministry is
after
all,
anything.
children.
all,
It does not
Yeah,
have to be a priesthood.
everything that you are saying is true. But
You want to
just
know what my
like
ministry is?
no. But just like when I call you Dr. Casey,
Hmm.
I'm not expecting you to be a medical doctor, but I expect you to have expertise in a certain field.
Okay, well, let me break down to you why I became a minister.
No, no,
So
no, no,
after
no, no,
no
no,
no
no.
no no no
Okay,
I think that I
okay, good.
deserve to be able to explain because you have a misconception of what your perception of ministry or what a title of an ordained minister is. So after my mom tried to kill me, I studied the Bible a little bit, end up going to the army. Was never ever religious. I would go to church because that was, the thing that you did when you was on Sunday. I got out of the military. I went to church for 6 years. I was an usher. I prayed. I was a intercessor prayer, so I did prayer every single day. Sometimes 2 3 times a day, and I felt like that was
Baptized?
my calling, sir.
Baptized?
I have been baptized. I actually, the second time I got baptized, I allowed my husband to do it. If I ever get married again, my new husband will also dunk me in the water and we will be baptized together. I believe in that. I don't believe that that makes me any more clean or any more extra than anybody else, because you can be baptized and still live hell. Um, so after my stint in church, I began to I actually moved to Phoenix to help open up a church. And in the process of that, I realized the business of church was more of a business than about the spiritual practices of it. After that, I began to study psychology, and I went to Grand Canyon University. It's a Christian school. And some of the foundational courses were ministry. So I took servant leadership. I took a lot of ministry classes. I took a lot of psychology classes, marriage and family counseling classes, all of those things. All of that knowledge led to me having a epiphany that there is too much division in religion, and that I would go back to where I started when I went to the army. No religious preference. Since then, I have been looking into spirituality, all aspects of it. I hate religion. I think that religion is hogwash. I think that it has its perks of teaching you something, but it's more indoctrination and taking you from knowing your own spiritual purpose and building you up as an individual soul to be productive in society. So I don't practice any religion. Sometimes I listen to church on TV, but most of the time I am finding flaw in how they want to interpret the Bible and make the Bible say stuff that it don't say. And then I read a lot of books. So because I read a lot, I've learned about the history of religion. I've learned about the history of spirituality. I've learned about African culture. I've learned about and studied about Native American culture and the indigenous people and what they did. And a lot of these things that people see as religion and Christianity are mixtures of different things, spiritual practices that work, but it's a lot of hogwash that is placed on top of it. So now, if you are not able to really view, read, and understand parables, if you don't study outside of the Bible, which most Christian religious people, they really discourage you from looking at anything that is not the Bible. So in those settings, you'll stay stifled, really, because you're not reading about the history of what the book is that you're reading from. King James wrote more than one book. He wrote a book on demonology as well. He wrote some other books, but if you're going to take one book from a person that's given and authoring a story that's about a story that he heard from another person, that's a whole bunch of he said, she said in the book. So when you look at the totality of his mindset, you cannot just take one book and say, okay, we're going to base everything that we believe off of his one book that was put together by a council of people that approved what went inside of that book. It'd be like me telling you I got a book about spiritual human behavior, but then not telling you about the books about faith. If you don't hear what I'm saying about the spiritual nature of your environment and your upbringing and your background, then you won't really comprehend what I'm talking about faith.
Okay, now here's kind of my take on this whole thing because number
On what
one,
I said, or this topic of religion.
well, the topic of religion, because number one, when you say, when you talk about King James or you talk about Christianity, that's not the only religion. There are other religions. There's Judaism. I
They
mean,
all messed up.
yes, they are, because they have one common denominator,
And
and that's
everybody
the
else is
fact.
wrong.
No, the fact that all of those books were written or interpreted by man. So whether I'm reading the Quran, whether I'm reading Judaism, whether I'm reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead, whether I'm reading the religion concerning indigenous Americans, these are all things or stories that were handed down by man. And as we know, and I'm sure all of us have done it. If you tell one person at one end of the room one thing, by the time he gets to the person at the other end of the room, that story is very distorted. So once again, I come back to the difference between religion and spirituality. And I think that there's a lot of confusion there because we think that in order for us to be spiritual, we have to be religious. And like I've said before, maybe it comes from combat experience, maybe it comes from, childhood lessons, but I have a problem when people try to confuse my spirituality with my contempt for religion. And that's because, okay, am
It's
I
funny
going
that you
to
say that because it's the same resistance, I'll say, that you are giving to me when I say that just because I'm an ordained minister doesn't mean that I'm religious. Because you're like, but wait, if you hold that title,
No, no, no. But
uh-uh.
but 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 it, but if you use that as part of your resume, if I tell you that I'm an ordained minister, you have to, and I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but I'm saying that I
One
have
has
to
to.
think. Well, okay. Let me ask, Miss Sims. If I tell you that my name is Reverend King,
But that is not. When have I ever introduced myself like
not,
that?
I did not say that you introduced yourself. I said that was part of your resume. And you have told us that you are an ordained minister.
Correct.
Okay,
but Reverend,
so go ahead, Mr. Scott.
But saying that I'm an
well,
ordained
I've
minister and
known
then calling
many,
myself reverend.
but
No,
see, I've known people. I'm going to tell you, people in my own family. Okay, as I knew them, they were reverend. Okay, I come up as a kid. I only knew my uncle as a reverend. Okay, I can talk to another one of my cousins and say he was one of the worst people in this city. He was drinking, he was beating his wife, he was doing everything you can think of, but now he's saved. See, this thing that religion can be used to me and the thought of it in a lot of different ways. So now
Hmm.
a lot of those guys that I can hear what they were as young people, now they're saved. They're saved. They don't. Well, maybe they turned their life around. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. I only knew my uncles as a good man, but I listened to the other cousins, and they say, "Man, you don't even have a clue."
You're right.
So
See, but
to
sometimes it's not
me,
they turning themselves around. Sometimes it's a mask. But we hope the best.
Miss
yeah,
Sims, you've been
but I'm
awful
just saying,
quiet back
religion
here.
can be used. It can be, the thought of it, and what we're see. It's by words that we convey our thoughts. And do you say a
Hmm.
reverend or you say a doc? You say it to somebody else. My sister's a PhD, Harvard, Columbia, lives in Southfield, Michigan. Okay, little neighbor girl riding her bike in front of her house. The neighbor girl falls out and hurts her leg. And my sister goes to help her, and the little girl says, "My mom says you're a doctor. My leg hurts." My sister said, "Well, I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm not that kind of doctor. I can't. I don't do that. I'm not that kind." So the words and how they're interpreted and what we think sometimes can be totally opposite, and it can be culturally. There's a guy, and I'm just going to use a quick football thing. There's a guy here that I think the best football player ever played here, Randy Moss. He says one day, "Oh, I can play when I want to play," and so all the white people say he only plays when he wants to play. I said, "Man, if you're from down south, you're gonna hear that." They say that boy can play when he want to play, meaning when it's tight, if it's the last inning, that's the
Mhm.
man you want to throw the ball to. That's all that means. It didn't mean that he just plays when he wants to play, but he took a big rap for that. They just talked
Mhm.
about he only plays when he wants to play. So I mean, these words and these things can really be confusing, and they can, especially culturally, it can be two different worlds. We live in two different worlds, really, with the white folks and us, to me. But that's just what I grew up with.
I agree. See,
I,
but
I
go ahead,
go
Miss
ahead.
Sims.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna
Listen,
say, I think it's a matter of lack of understanding and asking. You could just ask me. Like that's what we do when you called me that day and we were talking about it briefly. I was like, well, you didn't even ask, what is my understanding of ministry, what I do in ministry, what does that mean to me? Because what it means to me may be something totally different. I never in my life want to be associated with all I want is somebody's money. So I really don't even charge for the services that I do. I do a lot of things and I put it out there for free because it is ministry for me. So ministry for me means I help the thugs, the pimps, the drug dealers, the pole dancers. I want to reach everybody that don't understand spirituality, that don't understand how the universe and God works as a whole because we are all a collective. I want to reach them. I don't care about the people in the church. I mean, if they get it, come on with it. But if they don't, guess what? They think they saved. They think they better. They think they know more than the people that don't go to church. So I'm gonna let them have that.
I'm quiet, Mr. King, because, and I thought about this meeting. I'm quiet because I'm watching things play out as I thought they would, because I have listened to what you all. I've said way back when, if you listen to a person and watch their actions, they'll tell you a lot. And and so I was one of my questions that I was going to ask Dr. Casey was in terms of, and I was surprised when she said ministry. I'm not surprised that, oh God, who does she think she is? But a lot because she hadn't used that word ministry to describe part of, well, who she is or what she does. And so I was going to ask her, well, along the words of ministry, did you have a following as in like a church would, or do you have a specific ministry that you're interested in and that you do? And it sounds like that that's the avenue that you've gone in, while at the same time you know Christianity and all its ins and outs. I've listened to Mr. King, who said he was a PC and
PK.
PK, and the way he said it and described himself of letting me know that he struggled with that all since he was a kid, and it kind of sounds like places I've heard. He had to go to church whether he wanted to or not. So somewhere along the line, I was going to ask him, has there been some
Me too.
rebellion in that, etc., etc.
No,
And so I
not
thought about
not rebellion, Miss Sims.
resistance, resistance.
Resentment, resentment.
Okay, right, resentment.
Okay,
And each
for
of you are
all
speaking
that
from your.
for all that the church stands for, from the building to the tires on Reverend's car.
And all of you, both of you are speaking from, and all four of us are speaking from our experiences, and they're different, while at the same time, in a way, we know what 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 it is, what the church is, and the different entities of it, but we're coming from it from different respect perspectives. And in regards to, go back to what I said from the beginning, And as I started going to church, and I got curious when I hear something being said in church at that time, I got curious. So I went back and looked at the Bible, and that's when I learned: is this of God? Is this what God said, or is this is what man said, and have man has it interpreted through the years? Because as you remember, the early Christians were called believers, but through the ages, because the way man decides to divide
Mhm.
ourselves up until we get the Baptists, the Catholics, the Protestants, the
Miss
Lutherans.
Cindy, when I tell
That
you
wasn't,
in
and
2010, that's what really hit for me. I was just like, why is it so many? If we Christians, then why is it 18 different versions of Christianity, and why do they believe? So I started looking up the where religion started, and it was crazy because a lot of it started from witchcraft and ritual type of things, which are still in play right now when you think about the communion and all of that. That is a representation of witchcraft at its finest, because you're drinking of blood and you're eating of flesh, or the representation of that. And a lot of other things that Christians now have said, a lot of the things that come from Egyptian spirituality is evil, when a lot of what we do, or what Christians do rather, is based on those same things and the principles that they are calling evil.
well,
Precisely.
But in
and
this
we all
country,
know,
in
even
this country,
we all know, even at this time, that he who writes the history controls the history.
Right.
So through the years, different peoples, different ages have written what they believe in,
see,
and have
black
written in their
people is
self interest through the years
But
and ages, and we're here
it,
now.
and there's also another common thread that runs through a lot of religion: the fact that you have to suffer while you're alive in
Mhm.
order for you to be rewarded in
Afterlife.
death. Even
Mhm.
even when you
well,
talk
that's the
about
manipulation piece.
even when you talk about Islam, where you get what 10,000 versions or however many versions it is when if you die, if you're a martyr and you go to heaven. I mean, so my thing is, well, not my thing, but one of the biggest conflicts that I have with organized religion is, why is it okay for you to take advantage of me all of my life in order for me to build up a reward that
And that's
I
the
have to that I
manipulation.
have to die in
It,
order
it is the
to enjoy?
manipulation,
That
Mr.
that's the manipulation.
Yeah,
That's the
it's a lot of
lure. That's
manipulation.
black people in religion is one thing to me. We suffer from PSTD, post traumatic slave syndrome. Okay,
Yeah.
we
Hmm.
suffer from that to this
It's
day
Stockholm's
because
at
they
its
have made
worst.
this whole system about they're better. They don't want to live with us. The areas that we have are slums. They create these areas. They've run freeways through. I'm on committees and things where they talk about this. I said, well, but you guys did this. But I
Hmm.
learned they run this through in Miami, the Overtown area, black thriving community. They run the freeway right through it. It's just one of the worst ghettos in the country. But see, these
Same
things are
same thing here
created
in L.A. Same thing in
in,
L.A. Same thing in San Diego.
in religion
But
adds to it. It adds
yeah,
to
and
it. It adds
James,
to
you
it.
always go
It
back. God didn't,
justifies to them what they do.
and James,
Justifies it.
we go back to what I said in the beginning. I don't remember God saying you gotta suffer through your life. I remember him saying, I came to give you life and life more
And
abundantly.
prosper.
So here we go. So here we go again. You
But
can't get away
people
from
hold
God's
on
plan and
to
man's plan. And man's
they
plan,
hold,
yeah.
because Christianity makes them hold on to Jesus dying on the cross and his suffering more than his message. They, instead of okay, so literally, if you go right now and you Google search, or any search engine, and you Google Christ, it is the title for the anointing. It is not Jesus' name, it is his title. If you understand that it is the title for the anointing, then you understand why in the Bible it talked about renewing your mind to Christ. It didn't say renew your mind to Jesus. It didn't say come, you know what I'm saying, and be born again in Jesus. It talks about Christ. And people confuse being mind renewed to Christ and being walking in love. That's my ministry. You know what my ministry is? Love. My goal may be tough love, maybe crazy love. Maybe I might bite your head off, love, if you try me. But my goal is love because a lot of people think that love is a pushover sediment, and it's not. I can be tough and still be strong. I can be loving. I can teach you love. I can be loving to you, and I can embrace you. But a lot of people don't love themselves. So because they don't have sufficient love for self, it's hard to love other people. You can't treat your neighbor like you treat yourself if you don't love yourself. So guess what you're doing to your neighbor? If you hate yourself, if you always judge yourself, then what you doing to other people? Judging. A lot of things that we see people do in religion is based on how they feel in the inside. So if they feel like they can't do this, then guess what? Well, if you do it, then you wrong too. And it's really a whole lot of condemnation that's not even supposed to be in the body of Christ. But when you get stuck on the man versus the anointing, kind of like in church, they look at the man versus the anointing and then they get all confused. And that's why people are okay with suffering because they thinking they suffering like Jesus suffered. If he suffered for us, then I'll suffer too in the name of
But church
Jesus.
can't do anything for our day-to-day lives if it doesn't allow us to say that we're equal, that I respect you as a person, that I live a life that says, I'm going to save my money, I'm going to do things for my kids, I'm going to live my life in such a way. But then if you don't do, you're not following it, okay? And so what they have really done with us, you see, the religion has been, to me, so diluted because they don't give us any opportunity. We have to fight for everything. Why is it that we are in the lowest status of anything in this country? Why is it that we're always kept down? Why is it they tear up our community? Why is it that more black men are in prison than are out here in the
But, but,
work? Why do they have a welfare system that you can't have a man in the house? And so they keep so you don't have a family. All of these things, I mean, and they say they're religious. They say that they're religious. They have their Catholic churches, they have all these churches, but yet and still they treat us and feel they have the right. They don't see that
Religion
that's a
is a cult.
violation of their religion. They don't see that that's wrong. They can't see that. They think
Religion is a cult.
they
It's a
they think
cult.
they have
If you don't
it's
think the way that
many.
the religion people think, then guess
It's
what? Then you're wrong. You're going to hell. If you don't
it's
do what we
many
say do,
cults.
that is a cult.
It's many cults. Whether you're part of that 150,000 as a Jehovah Witness,
Listen, I have a
whether you're
whole
part of that Judea system. I mean,
and I
uh,
watched that Scientology show with
yeah.
Leon Remini. Listen, I did a whole series about religion because it's no different. Like they look at Scientology like, oh my God, it's just so bad. No. I've been to church with church people that act just like that about their pastor, about
Don't
their church, and they
don't
will
forget
then
about the
go
Mormon Church. Don't forget about the Mormon Church. Now
listen,
you can include all of them in there. You don't have to just.
listen.
I mean,
This is what I call Christian denial because people believe that as soon as you get saved, you get baptized, you go, somebody pray on you, and now everything that used to happen ain't happen no more. Everything just get washed
it's
away.
all gone.
That shit is
It's
so
all gone.
false. You don't just everything, and that's why people be in church screaming because they trying to forget about what they acting like ain't never happened instead of going through and healing and addressing things. It's Christian denial. They be like, "Oh no, we good." No, yo, no, not.
Haven't we all talked about passing down information? And this what has happened through the ages regarding man. They did back then what we're doing now, interpreting things. And what we're saying in our time is going to be written and interpreted for ages to come. And so it's a matter of interpreting, passing down correct information, letting people uh, know. And a lot of people don't go beyond because, and I talked about this last week. Um, if you trust in a person and they can manipulate you and have you under their control, and you will do what they want you to do. And a lot of times in going to church, it's been my experience is that people come to church out of hurt and pain, and they want to trust somebody, and
And that is the door to being manipulated.
they heard and know, and from their experiences, from their experiences, because pastors seem to know about pastors and ministers, whoever's in the pulpit, and they call themselves, um, know about religion. They don't. They want to learn about it. So a lot of times people only go as far as listening to what the message someone is delivering. They don't go to the extent of thinking about things and being curious about things, and then go and reading for themselves, kind of like I did, to see, well, wait a minute, this is not the Bible saying this, and whoever said that is something else. So that's how I distinguish this is of God or this is a man. And a lot of people hang on just uh, a scripture. They don't read to go ahead of that particular scripture to see what was going on that led to this particular scripture, and then what happened afterwards after that scripture. So people pick and choose, and we have been conditioned to do things, to quote certain scriptures without following up and wondering, well, why was this scripture even there? Even with the Ten Commandments, they're strong stuff. Why? What's behind this saying? What is behind this particular scripture? What's going on? Because if you do that and you start questioning and wondering and do your research, you'll come to realize that there's a difference between God's plan and man's plan, and that's how we are here today, talking today, acting out of incompleteness of knowing full, having full knowledge exactly what was going on that's been written and passed down to us, and realizing that the Bible, God didn't sit there and write the Bible, but He did rely on other people to interpret it and to write it, and then it got rewritten, and different religions came about. One of the things that, if you think about, that's kind of mysterious in terms of, not mysterious, but how man has acted down through the ages. If you think about it, one of the things that did happen was the in terms of Rome, and I'm talking historically. Back then, the most vicious people to the Christian and believers were the Romans. If you remember the killing, the Romans just took over everything. But
See,
nowadays,
the
but
Romans were the religious people.
but
But
nowadays, where is Christian? One of the religious one of the religious strongest sects. Where is it out of? It's out of Rome. That shows you how man, through his history, how things can change. At one point, the Romans were the enemy. You didn't go near Rome if you were a believer. You were running from Rome. Rome just, they took no prisoners, what to say, but because of certain happenings through the ages, Rome is now one of the centers of one of the religions. And you have to stop to think about, well, what happened to make that change? That's a
ah,
big
see,
change.
but that's a fallacy, Miss Sims,
Hmm.
because Rome is not the center. The Vatican is the center,
Well,
and the
okay.
Vatican
And
happens
it's
to
even deeper
be,
than that.
and the Vatican happens to
I said
be in
Rome,
Rome.
right?
But
Yeah, that's
but if you
my
really
words, too general, too general. I meant that. I said one thing, but my mind was picturing the
but
Vatican
but
right
but but
there.
but if you really want to get into some of the philosophy of what you're saying about Rome, read it. There's a little thing called the Vatican Papers, and part of it was written, I believe, by Pope Pius the
I don't consider that a
19th.
philosophy. It's in the Bible what took place to change that, to make that change. It's not a philosophy. If it is a
But the
philosophy,
Bible,
it's
the
not
Bible
mine.
isn't. The
The
Bible is a
Bible,
book
the Bible,
that was
just like
published in the 1800s or the
right,
1600s.
Well, like I said, it was written.
the
Whatever's written,
Bible.
it happened. It took place.
Well,
There's now a difference.
so did the Vatican Papers, according to their beliefs. But to me, the Bible is no more than the works of a William Shakespeare,
Mhm.
the works of Tolstoy, or
There's some great principles.
or anybody else that wanted to put a book together of a
Mhm.
collection of short
Well,
stories.
but,
Mhm.
but
It's
the
just what
black
I said.
church
Who
is different
writes the
than that.
history controls it.
The
For the
black
black
church
church, it's the
is
tradition, but you
different.
got to look at who
Well,
gave us
yeah,
Jesus
that's
in the
right.
Bible.
Is tradition, and what it is. I went to the church I grew up in. Oh, I don't know, for a service or something. Bethesda Baptist Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I saw some women sitting in the same seats. I'm 70 years old. Okay, they're sitting in them same seats they were sitting in when I was a kid in
And ain't
Sunday
doing no
school.
better.
And they're
Life ain't no better, I bet.
they're loyal to their church. They're loyal to their spirituality, and I respect them for it. I respect that they think
They
that this
don't
is
have
something that they
spirituality,
should
they have
do.
religion. It's a difference.
Okay, well, explain it to me because when I see them, they're sitting in those
Religion is
same seats.
rituals. Religion is I am going through and I am practicing these things. Spirituality is I have a individual spiritual relationship with God. It is
I'm
not
talking
contingent
about people that
upon
have never went to school, probably can't even read the
you don't
Bible,
you don't
but
you
they
don't
get something from being around people that they know, that they're people that know and think like them, and they get something from that. They
have their
know that
lives
those people
changed
have their God.
since you've seen
So,
them there before.
and I know
Because
every
if
church
not, then
isn't
they're
like
not
that. Every
growing
church not like
spiritually.
that.
If you don't grow spiritually, then you're in a dead church. Your church is not, if you are not able to go to your church and come out different and come out and you've addressed your issues and come out healed, like spiritually, I've gone through and I've talked to God, and me and God has sat down, and this is what God showed me about myself, and this is what God showed me that I need to do, and this is what God showed me. How does God show you? You may pray, you may get finished praying, and then you may be led to read a book, you may be thinking about something that you need to work on, and then you go and do research. God is going, if you answer prayer, if you pray, God is not saying, God, I'm praying that you give me an extra pair of glasses. God is not, there goes some glasses. God is going to tell you the steps you need to take in order to go and obtain whatever it is. God, and the way God does that, it can come through anyway. It may come through somebody listening to a show like this. It could come from somebody talking somebody that you just ain't never seen on a day in your life. And you know what? I just felt on my heart. I needed to share this with you. But people that go in and they depend on their pastor and a church building, a place, an establishment for their only source of God is missing the whole nature of God for real and
That says that
But
spirituality.
but
that
but
says it.
Dr.
No,
Casey,
that's the
Dr.
very
Casey,
wrong
maybe
thinking.
the
That's
women
the very
that Mr. Scott is talking about are spiritual, and
All right, have
they
their
figure
lives changed?
that maybe so. I haven't
I'm
talked to you,
asking.
haven't to
in the
that
wrong
that
way.
that but
I bet
it's
you they
okay.
old. They
It's
probably sit
okay.
around talk
Wait a
about
minute.
people, and they
It's
probably hateful on
okay.
the
It's
inside.
okay for
That's
it's
what old
okay.
people that be in religion do. They sit around, they gossip about the young folks, they talk about how they going to hell and they ain't doing nothing right, and they be miserable and they be just nasty. They be nice, nasty. They speak to you in church and they talk about you bad as soon as you leave. Then they just sit up in the church all the time. They do the same thing year after year after year after year. They send all their
You
money
know,
to the little TV
people have
pastors.
It's
They give
okay.
all their
Dr.
people.
money
Get
in the
Casey.
this part,
offering. They be broke and they
Dr.
be
Casey.
miserable.
Dr. Casey, it's okay
Dr.
for
Casey.
spiritual people to connect with other spiritual
You
people.
missing the point, Miss Sims. I didn't
No,
say that. I said if you're
but
going
I'm
and
saying
not
that.
growing.
But I'm saying maybe they are. Maybe they are growing.
I
maybe
can guarantee you, every old person that I
Dr.
know that
Casey,
been in church for the
I
last
know,
50
Dr.
years,
I
they in
know,
the
Casey,
I
church doing the
know.
same thing they was doing 50 years ago. They ain't got no
Dr.
better.
Casey,
Oh,
They still talking about
you
people.
missed the earlier part. Dr.
Oh,
Casey, you missed the earlier part when I was talking about my grandmother. Okay, devoted Christian mother, sang in the choir, matron at the church. Okay, never missed prayer meetings. And when my grandfather was teaching her how to drive, I heard more cussing than I've ever heard in my life. And I'm sitting back there as a 5-year-old. See, people are
I don't
people.
think cussing make you
People are
bad.
human. People are human. People are human. And they have their fallible. They try to do their best. And that's all we can really do. That's all we can really do. We're not going to
Religion
be
doesn't
perfect.
allow you to be human. Religion wants you to be a robot. You got to do it like this. You got to say it like this. If you don't believe what we say that it's okay to
Mm,
believe, then you're wrong. That's what
well, let
religion
me
is.
ask you, Dr. Casey, if you consider a person spiritual and the life has changed and they're on the path that you feel that that fit spirituality, what do
There
you
is no path that fits.
you don't are you saying you expect those people to isolate themselves from
No,
other people? That's why I
I'm
said
talking to
it's
y'all,
okay
ain't
for spiritual it's okay for spiritual people to meet and be
who said
around other
anything
spiritual
about that
people.
it was not
See,
okay for people to meet?
This me,
Miss Sims,
I raised a
Miss
question.
Sims,
Yes,
you once again you're getting religion confused with spirituality.
So
Just
no,
on the
I
path
know
yeah,
the
on the
difference.
yeah,
spirituality path,
I'm
there
asking
is no,
her.
the way that I help people, it is, there is no path that I think you should go. There's a path that your soul is drawn to.
I
There's a
said
path
that
that
you
you are
just described. That you just described because you, in talking to Mr.
But this
Scott,
is
you
what
did
I'm saying.
describe.
I can't tell you if you on the right path or not. I can tell you if you are following your soul's journey. I can help
Right,
you
right. I was
resonate
just
with
talking.
that in alignment. That's what spirituality is. Spirituality ain't based on what nobody else think, because guess what? A person could go and be a stripper and be on a more spiritual path as a stripper and help more people as a stripper and what she do in her time off from stripping than any person that go and preach all day and then live and be sexing all the women in the back of the church and be doing all the extra stuff that they ain't supposed to be doing, or be doing a whole bunch of contradictory stuff based on what they saying. It's not about what you do in the daytime. It's about what you do when ain't nobody watching. So I could listen, I'm a sex coach. I'm a minister. I am a life coach. I'm a relationship coach. I talk about everything. I talk about sex. I talk about lesbianism. I talk about gayness and
who,
all that. I talk about
who,
everything because guess
who are
what?
these strippers? Who are
Huh?
these strippers? Where are they? Who are these strippers?
I know a lot of very effective strippers that can go and help more people than the people in the church. I know people that right now that go sell drugs and will go give more money away than the people at the church with the benevolence fund. The benevolence ain't never been benevolent to nobody but the people that it's fluffing their pockets.
or the building fund. We've been building churches for centuries.
It's a
Yeah,
church on
yeah,
every building, and what has happened? Where
builders.
have we progressed in the belief system that is at hand? Honestly, as
I
a
don't know
people,
where.
we waiting on somebody to save us, but we're not progressing in the process. There's no
I don't.
progression.
I don't need to be saved. The only thing I need to be done. The only thing I need to do is just be left alone to my belief system,
Hmm.
which does not include possibly in your interpretation Martha, Mac, Luther, John, you know, but and whether or not I'm not trying to build up a reward in heaven. I'm
Right.
trying to be a good man on earth.
Hmm.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. I'll co-sign that. Yeah.
I'm going to
Isn't that
bring.
what?
Go ahead, Miss Sims.
Well, wait a minute. I know the difference between spirituality and religion. In the beginning, didn't I say that there is a difference between spirituality, religion, Christianity, etc., etc.? And I go back, think about what I've said, James, and I do know the difference. And Dr. Casey, I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm not saying that you're the you know where people are coming from, etc. etc. I was just trying to explain what I heard in the definition that you were using of spirituality. And we as a people, we can't look at a person to determine if they're spiritual or religious. We have to listen to them, where they're coming from, and their actions. Just like one of my favorite passages in the Bible is from James. James, in regards to faith without works is dead. I
See,
mean,
but that means something different to everybody, though. Everybody got a different interpretation of what each scripture
and I
means.
said
And
me,
the
and I
Bible
said
isn't
me,
really
and I said
bad.
Right.
me.
Yeah,
I
she
The
said
you,
Bible
me.
isn't horrible. The Bible is a good foundation for some people in order to get an introduction to God. Whatever Bible you're going to read, but you got to go beyond the Bible, because if you stay with the Bible, your ass going to be stuck.
Brother Williams, I know you kind of got in here a little bit late. You and I see uh, the Minister of Defense is here, and I'm talking about religion and
Hmm.
its place within uh, the black community. And one of my premises is that we do not need religion in order for us to be spiritual beings. And number two is that when we start using, as Dr. Casey said, when we start using the Bible in its literal sense, uh, we tend to get these things uh, confused. In other words, as I was saying before, it seems to be the foundation of most religions that in order for me to uh, get to heaven or whatever you want to call it, the next level, I have to suffer during this life. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, let me start by saying this. And I see we had a lot of heated words going back and forth. And I want to say this because I want to kind of address things as it applies to the listening audience. I want to make sure that our position is that what we don't want to do is alienate our people. First and foremost, the idea here is to wake our folks up and get them to recognize how things are being used, can be used to your detriment. So, from the Black Panther perspective, we like to take into account the psychological engineering of the slave mentality and how religion is used to weaponize a people from relating to self determination. That's the primary perspective I like to go from.
Say
With
that
that being
again.
said,
Say that again.
basically, how psychological engineering is used to use weapon religion to weaponize against our people so that we can't relate to self determination.
Okay.
And in saying that, think of it like this: first, religion is just a form of language weaponization. And what's used in that is images and language in order to subjugate a certain class or a certain people to a position of inferiority and to migrate another people to be the chosen, so to speak. Now, that's a specific religious sentiment that we're talking about, like I would say within Christianity or Islam. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that we don't need religion. I would say that religion, what it should do is, because what it is to religion or to tie back to God. So religion is, in essence, is supposed to be how a group of people come together in order to embrace collectively the idea of spirituality, which is a personal relationship and tie to the to creation, should I say, not the creator, but creation.
Hmm.
And the idea from that standpoint is where it gets weaponized is that you have a specific people that are only able to communicate with God directly or been quote unquote ordained or chosen, and
Hmm.
everyone else basically has to get their interpretation through them. You see, and that's an aspect of how it's weaponized. But more specifically, in the black community, what we've had, and you can just obviously take this back on through colonization, is that religion was used to justify slavery, was used to justify a position of slavery and a position of a people to be enslaved. And then once it came up a certain point in time to where that people you wanted to allow them to read, then they utilized a slave Bible in order to justify them in a place, but at the same time still give them something to be able um, to comprehend for the sake of being able to read. But the whole
Mr.
time,
Williams,
yes,
earlier in another episode, me and Mr. Scott was talking about down south being a Bible belt. Just the whole
yeah,
theory of it being the Bible belt
right.
because
I
they
grew up
use
there.
it to browbeat.
Hmm. Yeah, I grew up in
To
the South. I mean,
justify that we're inferior, to justify
right,
Mhm.
that
right.
we are inferior,
That's
which they
exactly what
know
I'm
is
And
not
saying.
true.
When,
and then a lot of
They know
that
how
comes
strong we
from
are. They know what we can do.
but
a lot
the
of that
whole
comes
point,
from them enslaving the indigenous people because they enslaved all brown people. Then you have to
right?
make all brown people
Everywhere.
believe that they are slaves and they have no stake in the country or the land. Because if you think that all y'all was slaves now, then y'all don't think that y'all own nothing. Y'all don't think y'all have entitlement to what's really your land. So
Correct.
it's so much deeper than just the Bible and just the games of religion and the 501(c) tax write off, because
Oh yeah.
all of those things are going to influence what you talk about
Well,
in
that's why I
religion.
said, and that's why I said self-determination. The whole point being is once you keep a people from being self-determined, then they have to look to you for their power. And then obviously, if you going back to the images that are portrayed in the Bible, if those images don't look like me, then I'm obviously not the chosen people. And if I'm not the chosen people, then everything that comes behind the chosen people is an inferior people. And so it just goes on and on and on from there. And so, but what I want our people to recognize is that in essence, what we have to get back to is knowing that these things was weaponized against us. And kind of like what you said earlier, Dr. Casey, I think that the Bible in itself can be used as a tool for to remove yourself from levels of enslavement.
I
I mean,
believe
look at
that there are very, very much so parables. There's a lot of things
right,
that's
right.
there that's written a certain way, but if you really think about it on a spiritual level, it means something very um much more deeper and
Deeper.
very poignant than the broad meaning that is used in a religious stance.
But I think what you said when you said parable, that's the key there because
Hmm.
too much of it is ingested as literal.
Hmm.
And that's where you start getting into this indoctrination, and that's where you start getting to where things are just completely, way off in left field. And I think that's part of the problem because what we see is that people tend to be dumbed down as a
Hmm.
result of how religion is
I
taught to
mean, but
them.
you just they tell you don't trust your heart, don't lean to your own understanding.
There you
All of
go.
it is a giveaway of your own self awareness, self consciousness, understanding yourself, and then it makes you to deny the parts of you that you think are unfavorable based on religion, versus saying, you know what, if I'm made in God's image, then God knew that I would go through whatever to make me, however, and it means that that is something that I need for this journey. It might not be where I see it now, and I might not have had to go through those things to learn it, but in the process, if you take the lesson from it, then you will see and get more of a blessing hindsight because now you're okay. I'm not, this is like playing a strategic video game. Life is like Jumanji almost. And in each level, you literally have to figure out, okay, if I've been in this position before, what did I do last time to get over it? What can I do different? Because at some point, the same monster that come out that closet or come around that corner, you're gonna have to shoot them in order to get past that monster. Or like in Mario Brothers, you're gonna have to pounce on the head of the beast that's trying to get you in order to get beyond it. But until you address it, as long as religion is a lot of avoidance and denial and not being happy with yourself, with who you are, and looking for a perfect fix. And that's not the way life is. It's about self acceptance, self love. Because if you really, and this is really what it is, because if you start loving yourself, if you start trusting yourself a little bit, if you start listening to your heart to figure out, okay, well, if my heart is telling me something wrong, why do I feel like this? Why is it directing me like this? Because something that you've experienced has made you put a guard up and created a defense mechanism in which now, in a case where you could be free and happy, now you guard it. Now you ready to fight or flight versus, okay, this is a situation, I'm gonna face this situation like I've never faced any situation before. But a lot of times we don't just cycle through people that give us the same vibes as old people. We do everything very repetitively, and a lot of things that people, pastors of religion, teach, they're just teaching what somebody taught them. They ain't really done the research most of the time. They just
Right.
going off of the good scriptures they tell you. And then when you go and you learn how to be a pastor, when they teach you, they also teach you that these are the scriptures that's gonna get them. These is gonna get them to give. These is gonna make them feel. They teach these people this.
Right. Right. It's a career. It's a career path.
It is, and a
That
very
and that's the
lucrative one
point.
too.
Yeah. So that there you have it. If it's a career path, then obviously that's going to be a flaw from the standpoint of the tie between religion and spirit and true spirituality. And I want to say this. This kind of also goes back to a point you're making in terms of just dealing with the weaponization of the Bible when we talk about how it is practiced or promoted as we are born in sin and that we're all sinners. And so, from that standpoint,
Hmm.
how can you look to your own self for critical thought when, in essence, you are a walking sin? And so basically, it teaches you to condemn yourself,
Hmm.
and
From
you
jump.
condemn from jump. And so, by us condemning ourselves from jump, that will automatically play against our
Our
ability to be able to be
our
empowered.
subconscious thinking. We already feel like we're not good enough from the jump. And
Right.
what sin really is God gave you a purpose. As long as you stay in alignment, most times things go right. You can tell in your heart and your soul and your stomach when it be like, oh, I might not should do that. And normally when you might not should, some bad something happen. But and if you stay on alignment for your path, you go along the alignment that you feel is right for your life, then a lot of the other stuff won't make a difference. Sin is when you start trying to go, oh, you know you're supposed to be going this way, but you decide you're gonna go that way. You chasing after some tail, you chasing after some money, you chasing after something that you know ain't got nothing to do with what you're supposed to be doing. That's what sin is. Sin is not I said damn. That's not a sin.
No.
I think this is where we get into a
Well,
problem, Dr.
why
Casey.
do churches why do churches have all these tax breaks? I mean, why is it that if you have a church, if you
They
don't have
can't
to
tell
pay
you who to
taxes?
vote
Why
for.
is it that
They when it started though,
what's the
It's a
lure?
business. It's a
when it
business.
To
started,
that?
it was to keep people in the line. It was keep people in line. They let the black leader go up there. They get them spruced up. Jesus gonna come and get you, and then they send them on back, and they be just the same way it is right now. People go to church on Sunday, they get their energy for that next week, and by Tuesday they need that refill, and then they just it's the
This
cycle.
the same reason why you pay for your pastor to drive a Rolls Royce and you take the bus.
Listen, I used to go to Mason Bethesda Church.
It's
He had a Lamborghini. I used to be cheering like, "Yay, we got him a Lamborghini!" And now, I
see,
mean, and I used to give a lot. Now, what I will say is, when I gave because I really was giving into what I believed in, and now I live a life that I don't regret giving but I also know that it wasn't based on me giving to him or giving in a certain ministry. It was where my heart was when I was sowing a seed to help better somebody else's life.
But that's what they tell all of the congregation. What you just said right there.
Mm-hmm.
So that
But that's why if you missed it earlier, Mr. Williams, I am an ordained minister, but I don't lead with that shit, and I definitely ain't asking nobody to send me no money. Listen, go listen to Speaking Freedom TV for free. I'm gonna tell you everything about God, tell you everything about spirituality. tell you everything about breaking any curses on your life, on your mind, and then guess
Let
what?
me write
After
this
that,
down.
you will be able to walk confidently in whatever you believe that God is telling you to do.
And then now, how much do I need for the prayer cloth? And how much?
Listen, my ex-husband, grandma, she passed away, God rest her soul. She used to be sending money to all them people. $100 clause. This man, and shit ain't work. It make me mad.
Well, let me throw this out here and for us to discuss this. I think going back to kind of what you were saying, Dr. Casey, in regards to just overall with the church, how is it that a person, especially, and I think this is a generational cycle we're talking about, how do our people start to come up out of the mentality that we can't find spirituality, or we can't find a morality path for ourselves without this fear factor being placed upon us to hold us in a position of morality? Because I think when you talk about religion, for the most part, that's where the weaponization come in. Because basically, if there's not this higher power that you have to answer to in the afterlife, how do you get someone to accept the fact that, okay, if I just go decide I want to murder such and such up the street because they done pissed me off, what's going to hold me accountable? If I know I can get away with it, what's to hold me accountable? And I think this goes into part of the mentality, whether we talk about physically murder or just talking about taking action into my own hands as an individual, which is why I said self-determination. Because the weaponization to me, when you talk about religion, to me, that's the ultimate position of it, is to keep you fearful of something greater than yourself so that you won't take actions into your own hand. Y'all ponder on
Let's
that
see,
one.
I think
that
that
person greater than
Um,
myself, that person greater than myself used to be my mother. Okay, that person greater than myself, he holler upstairs and say, Anthony, Junie, Joe, and I know I'm not the one that did it, so I go downstairs. I get downstairs, depending on how mad she is, she might just put me as a tune-up and send me back upstairs and get the brother that she's looking for. But see, that's what goes on in our houses. That's what went on
see,
in
but that
our
that
house.
fear, that
You see,
right
and that's
there,
what.
that fear based on what slavery taught them to do.
Well,
right. That right
Slavery
there.
yeah.
I
taught
think
You look at
the
these young kids
generations
now here
passed
in
down in the
Minneapolis. They're
slavery.
carjacking. They are carjacking. We got
You know
13,
why they're
14,
doing that?
15-year
That
old
is
kids. Take
not
your car,
because
take
of
your
the
purse,
reason.
take anything they can.
Normally, it comes from, that is passed down with generations of hurt, that is passed down with generations of poverty, that is passed down with generations of being misunderstood and having lack of guidance. Because if their parents ain't have no guidance, then how the hell they gonna guide the kids? Because they ain't got no
Thank you.
guidance.
Thank you. Where are
But
the
but
parents?
but
That's
and
the
then
thing.
that means
We're
that their
missing a
parents was
generation to
lost and
me.
didn't guide them. There's generations of a lack of guidance. Some of it is because of ignorance. Some of it is because of choice. Some of it, you got parents that work all the time and don't be around their kids, that they ain't gonna help their kids, but they think because they giving them money and providing a roof over their head that they
My,
doing what they supposed to be
well,
doing. You got
my
parents
parents
that
worked, and
will,
I had to watch the kids till they got home. If I had to go to baseball practice before my dad got home, I had to put my brother on a bike and ride 2 miles to baseball practice. And if I was late, I had to run around the park a mile before I could play. But I'm just saying, the home structure. I mean, we have to
but
take care of
you're saying
ourselves.
that, but you don't understand why the home structure is like that. And then as long
I
as you
do.
still going to these Christian churches that's telling you forget it ever happened, just forgive, don't think about it, act like, then guess what? You're going to get a whole bunch of people that stay in a sense of
That's
repetitive
fantasy.
denial.
That's fantasy. That's not the real world.
But that's what religion teaches you to live in. That is the point. That is exactly what I mean, because
I
that's what
think
it
one of the
teaches you. So if you got three generations of people that's just gone to church and they just think if somebody do me wrong, I'ma just forgive them, and then they walking around with that hurt from being done wrong and they ain't never addressed it, then guess what? Eventually, that's a mean old lady now. You know what I'm saying? Eventually, she's saying she talking crazy, she treating people bad because she's walking around with hurt. And you think that it's just them. Some of it's tough love, but a lot of it be hurt. And you talking about generations of you seen somebody get beat, raped, molested, and then they seen somebody get done, and then it happened, and then now it's going on in the family, and you can't say nothing, and now you got, man, it's a whole lot of hurt people that generates the hurt people, and the only way that we get any type of self-conscious awareness of not having the mindset to me killing the next person don't mean nothing is a lot of people think like that because they feel like their life don't mean nothing. So if I feel like my life don't mean nothing, it's easy to take another person's life. Or if the only thing your life mean is the money that you earn, then that's easy.
Mr. Defense, you want to chime in here, sir?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Um, well, my thought process was so pretty much for everyone to we got to get back on the basics. Just strictly fundamentals with it, and that fundamentals come from with teaching about the conscious. And the conscious is that when you break down that word, that's pretty much the inner voice that guides you on the rightness or the wrongness of the things that you're doing. And so when we tap into that, and we start tapping into that with our children at a young age, then that can be the guide for all of their moral compasses when they become adults, where they won't necessarily have to they won't have to lean on a religious doctrine in order to actually, um, uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for here? To calibrate their moral compass. When you break down the word conscious, is the prefix on the word con. The prefix con means with. So you take that with, and then the second part of the word, the science, and when you spell it like that, then with science. And science is, we had that is the pursuit of application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following systemic methodology based on evidence.
But brother, yeah, when you talk about science, okay, is science going to actually make you have you believe that an entity breathed life into some mud, and all of a sudden we became this intellectual entity? Is science going to actually have you believe that Lot's wife turned to stone because she looked back? So when you start talking about science and religion, you have to be very careful because, as we said earlier, a lot of people think that this is literal. They don't understand the idea of a story in order for you to. The word parable, they hear it, but do they really assimilate what the word parable means?
And that's why I was saying earlier about going into the fundamentals and tapping into our consciousness from that aspect of it. And I was just using that as how I broke it down was just if you break down the words, because that's pretty much all the English language is anyway, is it's just a bunch of big words made from all these smaller words. And so when you start to break things down and get to the fundamentals and get to the root of certain things, and that's when we can start to figure out, and that's when you can actually get to the answers of certain things, like Dr. Casey had mentioned, to where you have generations and generations of people that are scarred from things that have happened to the great grandmother and the grandmother, and then it's just passed on. And so when you get to things, when one person sees things and they know the root of it, they can chop it off right there, plant a new seed, grow a different tree, and bear a different fruit.
So, Miss Sims, as Brother Williams was saying, where is there a different path? Where is the light at the end of this tunnel?
Well, in listening, as I said before, I'm quiet because in listening to this conversation is playing out the way I thought it would. And all of you are saying different, but to say coming at the end the same thing. And it's kind of like I said way back when, and we all know it. He who writes the history controls the history. And back that will happen back then. It is rolled down to us, and it's happening now in regards to a lot of our black history has been written by someone else, controlled by someone else. Therefore, a lot of it's been left out. A lot of our history has been used for other people's self interest. A lot of us, even being alive, has been used for someone else's self interest, such as slavery to keep them rich in their what they consider their country going. And so it's, as I said in the beginning, to me, there's the God's plan and man's plan, and we're living out, I think, man's plan. And it's all is going every which way. Man's plan and how he wants to use how we use each other or exclude each other, etc., etc. And it doesn't always, it's not always ending up for the betterment of anybody at times and in certain situations.
Anybody want to chime in there?
Yeah, I jump in on this. I mean, what in essence, what Sims is saying is correct. The point is where do we go here for a solution? How do we pull our people back into the position
Yeah.
of the family addressing morality within the family versus reaching outside of the family for that moral character and moral conduct?
It's kind of like what we were saying last week in regards to passing on and teaching correct information to to uh, to people who may not have thought about in a different way what's going on and how it's affecting them, their situation, and other people. If we don't share certain information
It's
with each
hard to get
other,
accurate
it
information.
goes no place.
It's hard to get accurate information in religion when oftentimes in churches especially they tell you not to look up anything. They tell you don't study the history of religion. They tell you don't look up if you read any other book then something is wrong with you because you're trying to tamper with the word of God.
And
And
I can't deny what your experiences have been, and that what you're saying exists because I've seen it and heard it. But everybody has an experience that the same way.
see, but
So
most
you know,
people
to the
don't know that
lifestyle.
that the experience is not a genuine and authentic experience because that is what they've seen in church their entire lives. So if
I
you're
agree.
used to
I agree.
the
I agree.
rigmarole of I gotta go here, I gotta do this, this is what I'm gonna expect. I know these people gonna talk, I know these people gonna do, and it's just like a cycle of a continuous endless journey of spinning the hamster on a
But
hamster
and
wheel.
Yeah.
it's something somewhere down the line. It's someone or you don't come in contact with something to break that cycle of conditioning. You will forever live in it if you don't
Hmm.
get curious enough to wait a minute. What does
I mean,
that mean? And
I've
then
had a
go
lot of
back and look up
friends.
stuff your stuff, look up things yourself, like you did, like I did. Then
I've had
and
a lot of
rely on other
friends.
people's understanding.
I've had a
I'm
lot of
sorry.
friends where I've had to like help liberate them because they thought that like if they don't go to church then they don't experience God and they don't realize that the word spirit is actually breath. Like the spirit of God is the breath of life, like the air that we breathe, that's the spirit of God. And people don't understand that because they've never researched the words. It's a lot of words that the Bible say is bad or religion say are bad. And you look at the word and you be like, that is not even what the root of that word mean. And when you start looking at it, it makes you look at everything differently. It's just like when I found out that the order of Melchizedek was not about money, it was about the Holy Spirit. I was like, "Bruh, this ain't have," when I really sat back and read it and started looking at what I was like, this ain't have nothing to do with money at all. Like the order of Melchizedek ain't have nothing to do with money. It was about the anointing of God. But if you go to church and they teach the order of Melchizedek and they're gonna use it with that will a man rob God? Like it's a whole bunch of it's like keywords. It's like action statements that they use. The same way that they call you to action, they tell you go by here, click this, or listen now. That is the same thing when they say certain words.
Well, I would say that what we're talking about is really personal accountability. That's why I kind of still go right back to the idea of self-determination. As long as a person doesn't take into account my personal accountability to being able to understand, quote unquote, the word of God, or understand where this path should be taking me in this lifetime, then they're going to be on their hamster wheel. Because keep in mind, when we talk about religion from the perspective we're coming at it, it is an institution. Institutions are meant to survive. Institutions are meant to grow, just no different than any other business. Every business looks for a projection, a yearly projection, to be able to be better off than they was the year before. The institution of the church is the same way. So from that standpoint, I want to be able to grow my congregation. And in order to grow my congregation, I have to keep my congregation dependent upon my knowledge and my wisdom to guide them. See, that's a direct contradiction to the level of spirituality that as it applies to individual accountability that we're talking about. You see,
Are we still talking about church, or are we talking about the Bureau of Prisons?
They the same.
same, same
If the institution is the institution.
right. So that
I'm
I
just
think
they
that's the
they
asking.
deal.
they they they
I'm
work
just
out the
asking.
same merit system.
I'm just asking here.
That's why I
but,
said it's a
but,
cult. You
you,
know what a
but
cult
you
is? A cult
understand.
controls you. A cult
But
will
you
not let you
understand.
do anything outside of what they think is right. And if you do outside of that cult, they will kick you out. They will condemn you. They will make you leave your family. They will do all these things. These are things that religion, especially Christianity, do. If they don't listen, if they don't do like this, if they not reading their Bible this many times, they don't go to church, if they don't, and it's a whole lot of, if you not doing this, then you can't be a part of us.
Well, see, that's why I asked you. I mean, it sounds a lot like the Bureau of Prisons to me because, the same. When I went up for parole, there were certain things that I had to do. I had to
Mhm.
fulfill this obligation. I had to make sure that I had this when I got out. I had to make sure that this system was still in place. So that's why I was asking you about the parallels there, brother Williams.
Yeah, they are. I mean, but that again, that's all because we're talking about the same structural pattern in terms of keeping a person in line. And so when we deal with society, that's what we're talking about. How do you control and how do you manipulate the masses to stay within a certain segment of operation so that things can continue to flow the way they do? And when you liberate a mind and when you liberate an individual and then they take accountability to their own actions, now you free them from that level of, they've been freed from that level of fear. And so that makes them dangerous. This even goes back to what we talk about within the COINTELPRO when they talk about awaken the sleeping giant. The sleeping giant meaning the masses of our people come into the recognition of self-determination that we have the ability to chart our own path. And when we chart our own path, what does that mean? That means black people will recapture their identity. And by recapturing our identity, we recapture our culture, our way of life, our language, our customs, and all of these things tie back into religion, right? The religion we're talking about is not our religion. It was a religion that was forced upon us, and a way of life that was forced upon us. And that way of life basically took us away from being in control of who we are, what we are, how we see things, and the ultimate power source of our being and our likeness, which has been projected to be this European looking blonde haired, blue eyed person.
And that's
So
not even his
obviously,
description in the Bible.
correct. But again, if we don't read and we don't have that sense of knowledge of self and for
Mhm.
self, we won't we over we will see those words, but they have a totally different meaning. But that's just indoctrination.
Mhm.
And my experience has been that my activism and organization stem from the church. I was propelled from what was going on in the community, and our pastor had an activist type mind in regards to knowing what was going on and wanting the membership to, as a group, for the church to be involved in and doing and making a difference. Now, when I and so
Signal,
what's going on
signal
at the same
goes.
time that something was going yeah, that was going on with something at my son's school that wasn't right, and it needed parent intervention in regards to parents coming together to deal with that. So it kind of came at the same time, and as that was, I think, what was one of the things that was happening when he was in high school was there was a curriculum, all right, but two algebra teachers, I think it was, had decided to write their own algebra book, and I mean, in regards to on their own privately, and so they were the students that had been selected to be in the achiever class. They they were going by what these two men, two different teachers, were their own personal algebra book. And I would see my son come home, and he would bring a book, he would bring papers, and I got the question, "What's going on?" Then I started talking to other women, and so at that time, other parents of me, and at that time was when my pastor was saying and recognized that the church needs to be involved in social justice issues and what was going on. And one of the things that was the organization we decided to collaborate with one of the groups that they were dealing with was education. So that fit right into where what was going on personally with me, education, and that propelled me into learning the game, what the game was, who was the players, how they were playing the game, and how I should play the game, and so that propelled me forward. And out there in that community, in being active, was mostly 99.9% white folk, and so being in that environment, I had to listen and I had to determine whether these folk, from what my experiences and oppression from what I had gone through, were these individually. I had to look at them not as a group of people that literally was, my background. I had to look at them and listen to them to see, okay, are we on the same length in regards to how we're going to charge ahead and deal with this battle that's before all of us. And as I was learning things about them and what was going on, that propelled me to where 20 to 30 years of being out there um, in faith-based organizing. And so that's one of the perspectives that I come from in regards to back. Well, that's kind of changed through the years in regards to churches. Now, to me, churches nowadays have changed in regards to act. A lot of churches have changed from acting as a unit of membership, as a unit to deal with certain things outside of the church building. One of the changes that has happened here in Minneapolis is nowadays a lot of the membership of a particular church do not live in that neighborhood anymore. They have moved to the suburbs and have other interests. But that strong pull, as we're saying, whether it's religion, spirituality, whatever, they feel a loyalty to the church that not only happens in the denomination I'm connected with, but also other denominations. And so a lot of times churches are empty until Sunday or something's going on or Wednesday prayer meeting time and
or
things like
until
that. And back
or
then, to to uh, to programs that people were operating from was the social service model or the social justice. Now, at some level, the social service model said, okay, you get what I want you to have, when I want you to have, how much I want you to have, and go away, kid. Don't bother me till the next time. The social justice model said, what can we do together to help facilitate where you want to go and what you want to do, and tell me how I can help and aid you and work together to do this. And that's still in operation now, although it looks differently.
Miss Sims, I come on the show in your city every Saturday called Our Black News.
Right.
Okay. First of all, when you talk about the different organizations, and this is an outsider looking in, okay?
Hmm.
When you talk about the church and you talk about the activists and you talk about how bad a job we're doing with the education in Minneapolis, you talk about the gang problem in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. But you recently had an election and you elected the same damn people. So how are you going to elect the same people and expect them to do a different job?
Number one, what?
Hold on.
Okay,
Now.
okay.
You talk about the different things that the church is responsible for, but yet and still, when these projects that you're talking about are going through the community and displacing black people, the church is just like everyone else. Well, if we can get a little money here, or if this happens, then it's either the will of God, or well, this is just how things are done. These are the things that we have to get away from in our generation. Me and you, we're responsible for this bullshit.
I can't deny some of that truly goes on, and some of that is happening. Some of it is not. When I listen to that show, what is Our Black News, to you all as you talk, I I think, where are these guys coming from? Don't they? It's like two different worlds, and some of it to me as I listen is media, because you only skim the surface of a
Well,
subject.
well, like,
One of them.
like for instance, you had $600 million appropriated to your educational system, and half the kids in your educational system can't read.
This is true, and it's what we're saying. But we're all saying that in terms of,
We're saying, what are we doing?
because
I'm trying to get away
enough
from
people,
saying.
right? And
I
I'm
want
out.
to
The
do
people that
something.
the people that I'm connected with are out there doing things, doing what we
It's taking
can.
you 10 years to get a rail system, a light rail system through your town. ten
And the only
years. That's a
and the only
generation.
on the only reason it survived, minimize those 10 years, it's supposed to have been somebody out there pushing it up the hill, won't let it go. And one of the reasons that I've kept in it with, because I know and realize that if somebody from this community isn't out there, we're going to continue to get crumbs left over or nothing. And as I'm out there and I'm looking around, I don't see black folk. I don't see black folk. And until last year, when all of a sudden things went awry and we have to start all over, then a lot of people like me and the other people that have been out there working for years insisted, if you're going to start over, you got to bring more, saying to these organizations with the money and power and control and wanted to build this, you got to bring more of the community in. You have to intentionally go out and reach people and whatever. And that's one of the things that's happening now. That's not saying, but I have knowing the system, a lot of things aren't being told to new people that are being brought on in terms of the history of what has already happened, so they can know, so they can make better decisions and look around to what's going on. So, right, all this has happened 10 years or more so, and that's draining stuff. That's, I mean, all the work that I have done and being involved in other people. If I look back at it and say, it's all gone to waste, nothing has happened from it. Right, that line hasn't been built, but something has happened from it.
But
People haven't totally given up. And in regards to the elections, yes, in for me, elections and politicians, I don't put anybody on any politician or want to be politician on a pedestal and think that they're the savior of us all. It doesn't work that way for me and the corner that I'm in. And when you have people running for different positions, for me, I look to see what they're saying, if their actions fit their what they're saying, then sometimes it doesn't always so. But look at start comparing them to each other. Who I think is going to move the game a little further ahead, etc., etc. And a lot of people don't vote. Number one of the reasons why the same people get elected, a lot of people don't vote for various reasons. And so they leave it to the people who are voting to make a decisions for them in terms of moving forward or not going forward. So it's been a struggle. You're right. The same people politically, some of them are still out there. Um, like the person that was reelected in my ward is is the Attorney General's son, who's an
you,
actor.
you,
And
you got the same mayor, you got the same mayor, you got the same city council.
not
Basically, you got the
everybody, not
same.
everybody. No,
Well,
there's 13 city council members. I think most of them were uh, were overturned, but the ones that are in place, they were real strong in advocating for some of the things that didn't pass. So now you have a city council with a mixture of the do's and don'ts. And if we on the outside gonna keep an eye on this and push them, all they're gonna do is struggle with each other and spin their wheels, and nothing will happen for the next 100 years.
so, Brother Williams, how do we get a younger generation involved? Even even like your minister of defense, some other people that young people that we've had on the show earlier. How do we get the young people involved if we're still selling the same old song?
Well, that's I think that goes into it. We can't sell the same old song. One of the things I do want to point out that I think um, I want to make sure we all recognize, especially the listening audience, is that when we talk about social activism, there is nothing to not to say that a person involved in religion or church can be a social activist. Keep in mind the best example that comes to most people's minds is Dr. Martin Luther King. And what was he? A reverend. Al Sharpton, reverend. Jesse Jackson, reverend. So we're talking about church people that prominent church folks that get involved in activism, civil rights. But keep in mind, I started the show talking about psychological warfare. Psychological warfare is what keeps us inundated in the same mentality, slave mentality. This is what we're talking about. The same mentality is utilized again in religion, in those institutions. We have to go back to concepts like neurolinguistic programming. Okay. And when we talk about neurolinguistic programming, we're talking about a psychological methodology that is used to teach how to manipulate a mind and control the masses and the people. Okay, so this is played out and taught to people in positions of power. What are we talking about? Pastors? What are we talking about? Salesmen? What are we talking about? Politicians? And so on. But oftentimes, most of our people are just completely unaware of that. So you can get a congregation or people involved in social justice, but that does not mean that you're freeing them to be liberated individuals that will,
Right.
in turn, be able to change the dynamic of what's going on. Another example of that would be if you really talk about the power that the church holds but doesn't utilize. Let's just talk about the economics, the amount of money that goes through the church. It's been proposed that if you take the same congregation plate, if every person within that church, if you were to take up a finance an offering, so to speak, you can basically literally probably be able to start a business every Sunday for somebody in
Listen,
your congregation.
they have all of those financials written down. They keep track of who tithe, who don't tithe, how much they give over. Normally, they sometimes want to know where you work at and how much you make, depending on the church, because they want to make sure that those numbers is adding up
Adding up.
to what they're supposed to add up to. And a lot of things like this you will not see from the pews and the seats of the congregation. This is not the conversation that they giving you when they telling you to offer and all of that stuff. This is the things that you see when you begin to work in ministry and you
Right.
start to see the back office work of how things go on. That's
Mhm.
when you really see what happens with those finances. That's when
Right.
you really understand that they will. I've seen people get put out of churches because they was not tithing. They feel like
Thank
if
you.
you're not giving your money here, then we must not be leading you. No, I'm just not gonna break my pockets to feed you, and I'm starving. That don't make sense. And a lot of people, I've seen it over and over again,
My
where a lot
sister
of
got a
people.
letter from the church asking her how come her tithes were late. Okay,
But that's what I'm
and
saying, and you will see where people will be in poverty because they're in poverty because they're giving so much that they will never be able to have a substantial living because they're giving too much. They're giving everything that God is trying to bless them with. They're giving it away.
the
They
last
just giving it away, and they believe that if they keep giving, that eventually it's gonna come. Guess what? It didn't came, and you didn't gave it away, and
the,
that's the problem. That's why most people stay in church and in poverty because they are not saying, okay, God, let me make sure my house is straight. Let me make sure my finances are straight. And then let me give where God tells me, who God tells me to give. Because God might not need you to give to the church. If the church is making $1 billion a year, then God don't need you to give no money to the church. God is not gonna stop blessing you because you're not giving to the church. Go find
God
some other way to be a blessing
God does not need money. The
at
institution
all.
of the church needs money. Let's
Mm-hmm.
get that straight because oftentimes people they use that all the time. Giving to God, you don't give God
Mm-mm.
a
A
dollar
dime.
bill. That doesn't make sense. The
Mm-mm.
economic model of currency has nothing at all to do with God. God will want you to do, going back to what Sim said, work, community.
Mhm.
You do the work. If
That
you want to talk
same
about
money.
following Jesus, it wasn't about money. It was
Mm-mm.
about the work that was done in the
Mhm.
community, work that was done in the world. That's
That
what you
same
would do,
money can
your
be
labor.
used to feed people, clothe people, and not giving people money on the street that's out there with their hand out. I'm talking about going and
Yep.
saying, okay, what do you need? How can
Right.
I supply your need, not your want? Because a lot of people will, and for me, I'm a single mom. I have two children. I don't work a regular job because I'm a disabled veteran, but there are a lot of people that would be in my same shoes and will still go and look for a handout when a handout is available just because they can versus them needing it. And there are people that really need it that won't go. And I always pride myself to be I'm not uh trying to win nothing that I know somebody else is desperately in need of, especially because my prayer to God was, God, if you supply all of my needs, if you're gonna do all of these things, this is the deal. God, you gonna look out for me. I'm gonna do whatever you want me to do. So whatever you put on my heart to do, I'm going to do. But if I gotta work for it, if I gotta go out here and I gotta hustle and bustle, then my focus can't be on my calling, my gift, my purpose, because I'm hustling and bustling. But even within that, I should be able to be productive and effective and help people and strengthen people and encourage people to walk in their light. Everybody has a light. You got to find your light.
And Dr.
One of the
Casey, when
things,
you were saying all that, you was talking to yourself. Your inner self is who you was talking to.
one of the
And
things
that's what
that
a lot of people think of God as an outward thing. And what we really have to come to knowledge is God is within us all. If we're made in God's image, if that's what we're going to believe, then we're all God's. We just have to awaken to that understanding and that fact. And that's where it's to keep you doubting yourself, to keep you not leaning on your own understanding. Because if you start understanding this or some shit that they don't want you to understand just yet, then they're gonna be like,
Yeah,
don't lead to your own understanding. You gotta let God do it.
there
Well,
you
God
go.
is gonna tell me to do something in order for it to get done. God is just not gonna. I told you, you can't say, God, I want a pen, and God just gonna be like, oh, there go your pen on the table. Like, no, you going there are steps that you have to take to really awaken your soul. Some of that comes with healing. Some of that comes with addressing the things that you are afraid to address within yourself. Why did I become who I am? How did I get like this? How did the life experiences that I've had shape me into who I'm supposed to be? Because guess what? I've been like this, I think, ever since my mom tried to kill me. I always said, God, if God wanted me to go through all of this to help somebody else, then I'm with it. Because if I survive this shit, then shit, somebody got I have to be a tool to help somebody, because there's no way that I've experienced the harsh things that I've experienced, and I'm not supposed to help somebody else overcome so they don't have to experience that thing the same exact way. It's no way. I didn't survive too much.
some
See,
of the experiences,
I,
that I came from, whether I found it on my own or heard the teachings of the older pastor of my church, he taught and said to us, "Look, you, the people, are the church. This building is not the building. This is a structure.
That is not
You,
that's
the
not what they
people,
teach us
but
now.
you,
but he asked you
you,
for money for the
you, the
building
people."
fund every Sunday.
I'll tell you my experience, and I'll get to that. You are the ones that need to go out into the community. And God's not going to drop down out of heaven and change things. He told you, his plan is for you to do it. As far as the church and reading the Bible, is what I had. One of the things I questioned, I had to go and find out on my own, reading the Bible and think about it in terms of God's plan or the early Christians' plan, the tithing, 10% of whoever was organized. Now, 10% meant if I made $1, I really made $1. I gave a dime. If you made $100, somebody 10% for you is $10. So somehow that was
But the Bible never
worked.
ever said that.
Is
Well,
that
I
before or
mean,
after
whatever.
taxes?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
They want it
I,
off the gross. They want it
well,
off the gross. They don't want
That's
it
once
off
you
the
gross.
net.
once
That's
They
you
don't
gross.
want
did
it off the net. They
once
want
you
it off the
did
gross.
once you did, like James said, once you did what you were supposed to do, uh you, it wasn't up to you what they did with it, but in terms of tithing, that. And then one of the things that my older pastor said to me that I'll never forget, that was as I was out there, he said, "Lashella, where you see God is where you see God at work, that's where you need to move to, in regards to
See,
various things that was going on I was involved in. Where you see God at work, that's where you need to move to in terms of being out there and representing yourself, your community, and your church. where you see God at work, that's where you need to be moved to, and you have to stop and look to see. Is it, like I said in the beginning, is this a God or is this a man?
Well, see, I kind of have another different concept on this because my covenant with the man upstairs is if you let me wake up in the morning, we can work the rest of this shit out. you know, I can go from there. Just let me wake up. Then we can then we can work on my plan for the day. But the first thing I need to do is wake up. And that has nothing to do with religion. That has nothing to do with my spirituality. But we can keep on going here. As usual, we've already went beyond time. So, Miss Sims, I'm going to give you the final word first. Then Dr. Casey and Brother Williams, we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to let you close out the show tonight.
Okay.
Okay, I'll leave you with this, and I think about this often. One of the things that John Lewis says, and I put this in my comments too, when you come out here with the group that you're with, uh, when you see something, say something. But he did not. But he didn't say when you say something, be ready for consequences. So you have to think about that. When you see something, say something. That's how you get things going to try and make a difference. But be prepared that there will be consequences possible, bad, good, and ugly. Mostly the bad and ugly consequences, because usually when you're saying something, you see something, you're saying something, somebody's doing something that's not right. So you see something, say something, but prepare yourself to deal with the consequences of what you say.
Great
That's it.
advice. Great advice there. I love that. Dr. Casey?
My final words today would be the more you understand and know yourself and accept you for who you are, and consider the fact that I truly believe that before you come to this earth, that at some point, as a soul, you sit and you speak with God and you agree upon what you will do on the earth when you come to the earth. And I believe that once we begin to heal and heal our inner child, come to the innocence of our spiritual being when we were a child, we will begin to walk in our light. When I say walk in our light, I mean unlocking the inner you, because hurt allows us to like cake on. It's like a defense mechanism on top of a defense mechanism on top of a defense mechanism. And when you begin to heal and you address those deeper issues, you begin to remove the defense mechanisms, and it makes you freer, it makes you clearer, it makes you have better insight and understanding, because all of the things that were hanging over your head and blocking you from experiencing life in a childlike faith state, not childish, but a childlike faith where you're open to believe the Spirit of God when God speaks to you. Because children hear spiritual things and see spiritual things that adults, we've been so boggled down with life that we can't understand or comprehend. So when you begin to work on healing yourself, you begin to open your heart to the understanding of your purpose, to being able to be in spiritual alignment, and to live your best, most fullest life. We're not talking about partying and all of that, but partying may be included if that's what will make you happy in your life goals and your purpose. If the people you are supposed to reach are in uncommon lands, then that means you're going to do uncommon things. Be willing to work on you, to heal you, so that you can pursue what God sent you on this earth to do.
Very deep thoughts there, Doctor. We appreciate you and look forward to talking with you next week. Brother Williams, take us home.
All right. I just want to say that leading into this segment and going into the next area of the same discussion, that the listening audience think about the fact that, in essence, when we talk about religion or we attach ourselves to that, it just has to do with every person on this planet has to have a sense of purpose. Everyone wants to feel like they're a part of something. And so when it comes to that, be able to connect yourself with a sense of purpose as a human being, and a sense of purpose as it applies to what you need to do to hold yourself accountable to do the work for the people in the community that you live in with your family, and just as an individual. Tie yourself as an individual, a family, and a community to a sense of purpose, period. And then that will help you to develop your physical, mental, and then spirituality as it applies to a sense of purpose, which in essence will go take you right back to the concept that Parliament Funkadelic talked about when they said free your mind and your ass will follow. The kingdom of heaven is within. So it's in essence, we're just talking about being self-determined as a people, and we don't want to alienate religion, but what we want to make sure our people recognize is that it comes a point to where we must be able to see the psychological damage that has been done, and how anything and everything will be used as a weapon against you to prevent you from being the greatest person that you can be. And so just do that self research, and that go down that path of self discovery and self journey. All power to the people.
And thank you so much, Brother Williams, Miss Sims, and Dr. Casey. And I look forward to talking to everyone next week. Hope everyone has enjoyed the program, and we'll talk to you next week right here.
Peace and love till the next time. Bye bye.
All right, Miss
All right.
Sims. Uh, Dr. Casey, I'll talk to you next week. Make sure you put on your mask. No.
Listen, as long as y'all vaccinated, I think I might need to wear my mask. Them germs be coming.
I didn't tell her I got my booster shot on December the 18th.
Oh God, I'm gonna be
I
praying for you,
I didn't want to
Miss Sims.
set her off. I didn't want to set her off, but I'll see you guys the next time. Good night.
When I come down there giving away water, Dr. Casey, I'm gonna make sure I give you a big hug. No.
Give her one for
Oh,
me too.
and Mr. Williams, when we come back next week, I would like to know your interpretation of me being an ordained minister, because
Okay.
the assumption is that it must be religion based, and that it must be lived up to some type of stature. But I would love to hear your input next week.
James
Okay.
crossed
Got
that
you.
line. I'm warning you. James crossed the line.
Hey, I crossed it, stepped on it, erased it. The whole, you know,
It's no line.
hey, I'm like AAB. I leave no bridges unburned.
All right,
Have a
y'all.
good one, everyone.
All right,
Talk
see
to you
you.
next week. Yeah.